took a look at my ancestry and saw that I'm getting nothing for free here. There's no people living a long life. So I need to do it myself. So I took a look at myself in the mirror and understood that I'm starting to look like my patients. I weighed 40 pounds more than I do today, did not exercise, did not care about sleep, drinking a couple of glasses of wine every day, doing everything wrong. As I started to read books on how to live longer and healthier, I understood that there was so much to gain.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Torkil, it is great to be here with you on the Home of Healthspan, and you have quite an interesting and impressive background. But before we jump into that, how would you define yourself?
Hi, Andrew. Nice to be here. And how to define myself? I'm an explorer of life, enjoyer of life. That is my main goal, to be in a position to get as much out of this, hopefully 80 plus years that I would be allowed to live here on this planet, and see as much as possible of it, understand as much as possible of it, and just have a great time here on Earth. And that's what I'm about. Yeah.
And in that, right, to truly be able to enjoy it, to experience it, to see it, health becomes a big part of that, no doubt, for you as a physician, as someone who's literally written a book on the space. What would you say your goal with all this is? And we'll get into your story and your own personal journey. And maybe the goal was different 10 years ago than it was today or is today, or maybe it's been the same and you've had the same goal. But what would you say your own healthspan goal is?
My own healthspan goal is that my health is not in the way of me exploring life, enjoying life. And of course, as a doctor, this is what I see every day. People that are inhibited in their life by different kind of health situations. And I don't want to be in that situation. And what I now know as a doctor is that we can do so much to avoid it. What we learned during medical school, in the last century, last millennium, and it feels that way too, was that we thought that it wasn't so much you could do. If you did, have good lifestyle strategies, maybe you live for like 2 or 3 years longer. But why bother? It would take you 2 or 3 years to achieve that. So why bother? Now we know that we're talking decades of a gained health span and lifespan, doing the right thing, which is what I describe in my book, The Post-Cure, of course. That is what is important to me, both to live it like that. I was not a writer or an author originally. I was just interested in this for my own sake.
It is powerful. This is the third conversation I've had in the past 2 hours with people in this space that it's the common story of how they got into this space of, hey, I had my own issue. I addressed it. I found these things and I thought, wow, it would be really selfish of me not to share this to the benefit of others. And so that resonates more than you may realize, just back-to-back conversations. I would go back to a distinction you made before the call, but then also just now on maybe there are these 3 tiers of health. There's, hey, your health is getting in the way of you living the life you want at one extreme. There's another of the fully optimized, squeezing all the juice out of it. And then what you're talking about is somewhere in between saying, hey, it's not getting in my way. And I think of with another podcast guest, JJ Virgin. I was at a conference with her and she was talking about these exercise snacks and say, hey, did you know that moving your body vigorously for just 10 minutes a day reduces all-cause mortality by 50%? And 4.5 minutes does it by 28%, right? And so who doesn't have 4.5 minutes to do some jumping jacks and push-ups and air squats? And what I think is often missed is the 90% of the effort is to get that last 10%. But if you just put 10% of the effort, like just the little bare minimum, you unlock so much value to stop your health getting in your way. And I mean, you're certainly trained as a physician. You see a lot of patients on this, but you had your own personal journey into this, right? Like physicians, a lot of times their health comes second because they're working so hard. So can you talk a little bit about your own aha moment on your personal health and journey there?
Yeah, my own aha moment was not really my own. It was my father. 10 years ago, he got cancer and died in the course of like 3 months. I took a look at my ancestry and this tree and saw that I'm getting nothing for free here. There's no people living a long life. So I need to do it myself. So I took a look at myself in the mirror and understood that I'm starting to look like my patients. You know, I weighed 40 pounds more than I do today, did not exercise, did not care about sleep, drinking a couple of glasses of wine every day, doing everything wrong. And I realized that as I started to read books on how to live longer and healthier, I understood that there was so much to gain. So that is how so it was kind of changed by proxy, so to speak. And luckily I was 45 at that time. And that I think is just enough that you haven't lost too much on living a suboptimal life. And I totally agree with you that I also mentioned in the book the 80-20 principle, that from the 20% of effort, you get 80% of the result. And if you want that last 20%, you have to put in the 80% of effort. And I just want to do as little as I can every day to stay healthy and spend the rest of the day living my life. I don't want to fill my whole day trying to live healthier or longer and doing all sorts of things, because you could lose yourself, you know, in health optimization, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are extremes of this, right? So you have the Brian Johnsons of the world that really go into it, and there's a place for that. And there are people that they push more for that. And then there's the minimum effective dose approach of saying, hey, I'm here to live this good life. And so I just want to get that 80-20 on it. When you first looked in that mirror, and condolences on the loss of your father, and saw your heritage and everything going on, what was the first step for you, right? Because it can sometimes be overwhelming for people. What did you decide, hey, here's the thing, now that I'm seeing this, that I'm going to change tomorrow? Was it, here's how I'm going to eat differently, here's how I'm going to now work out a certain number of times a week, or add strength training in? Like, what was that first thing for you?
I think the first thing was just becoming aware of it. And then the first thing I did was cut alcohol, because that was, I understood that it was so detrimental to my health. I could see it, you know, on the heart rate monitors, that this is such a huge factor, sapping me of my forces. I used to think, you know, 2 glasses of wine was recommended by doctors, you know, probably just 15 years ago, that 2 glasses of wine for men and 1 glass of wine for women. And of course I said that, great, you know, and then in the evening I would feel calmer and falling to sleep and then thinking everything is okay, until I started tracking my health and saw that it's horrible with alcohol. And Whoop, you know, the band that you also use, when they track their customers, they can see that alcohol is by far the worst stressor of all. And I didn't know that until I started tracking. So that was the first one. And I started to do a little bit on all the different factors. I started to train a little bit. I started to work out 2 minutes a day, doing squats, push-ups, and sit-ups. And that's it.
Would this be in the morning when you first woke up? Like, how would you fit this into your day, that first 2 minutes?
Yeah, I would do the sit-ups in the morning, and I will do the squats and push-ups around 5 o'clock. It's kind of a routine.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and that was enough, because I used to be an athlete. I used to be on the national team in kayaking, paddling, and of course, suddenly I could see my own body and face that I hadn't seen like in 20 years. You know, after losing the weight and getting the muscles back. And it didn't take more than 2 minutes a day, as long as I did it every day. And I had not exercised for many years, you know, thinking that, okay, either you do 1 hour of heavy weightlifting or nothing at all. And just doing that every day made all the difference.
Yeah,
and I've been running. I was running New York Marathon last week.
Congratulations! I hear it's a
you.
perfect situation for it. The weather was beautiful, and
it was fantastic. Yeah, it was a blast. And I wasn't a runner earlier, but I started to run maybe 2 times a week for half an hour in zone 2, maybe zone 3. And that was just to see if I was able to run a marathon. I did my time will not impress anyone. It was 5 hours and 24 minutes, but just to do that little amount of training will make it possible for you to run a marathon. That was what I wanted to test.
It's amazing. And so now, are you still just doing the 2 minutes every day plus 2 days a week of running, or have you added anything over time?
Yeah, I usually maybe every other week or every week if I have the time. Being a best-selling author is not a good thing for your stress levels. So I will probably do some extra workout that I do as I'm writing, as I'm doing office work. I have the equipment in my house, in my living room. So I can do some exercise and then write or do anything and then another exercise. And I can spread it out over like 6 hours and do maybe 20 different exercises.
What is that equipment that you have that allows you?
Just what do you call it? This small weights that you can put on, and I have I can do pull-ups and different things.
Okay, so it's a rack with that, and then you have, is it plates that you use, or is it one of those all-in-one dumbbells?
Yeah, all-in-one dumbbells. That's probably what you would call it. Yeah, and that keeps me strong enough. I don't even want to look stronger, so to speak. So that's enough. And I also use a rowing machine. So I was doing this 1 year of running. I will keep running once a week and then maybe add 2 days of rowing machine. And that's enough. So that means a total of exercise every week, maybe 3 hours at the maximum. And that's keep me in VO2 max of 45, which is good enough. You need to have a good enough VO2 max. You don't want to be in the lowest 25%. That's the big problem. Whether you have on the 50 percentile or the 2% doesn't matter so much when it comes to health span or lifespan.
Okay.
So as long as you are on the average or above, is good enough.
Okay. That I'm sure that will be comforting to hear for many, many listeners.
If you're on the 25th percentile, your 10-year survival is 96%. Okay, on the 25% best ones. If you're on the 2% best ones, it's 97. So it's just 1% extra, right? And it would take you so much exercise to do that step from 25% up to 2%.
Which could be fine for people that love to exercise, right? But probably do it because you love rowing or running or biking, whatever it is, not for necessarily that 1% benefit. You just do it for a different reason.
Exactly.
I mean, it's super powerful to hear, right? We started at 10 minutes, 4.5, and now we're hearing 2 minutes, right? Like you can make 2 minutes in your day, even if you broke it into 4 30-second slots to get the different exercises in, with just the amount of benefit. But that was paired on a nutrition side as well. So, there's certainly the ill effects on our sleep, which I want to get to. But just pulling out, maybe that's 275, 300 calories a day from 2 glasses of wine, that's going to have an impact too, right? If you're replacing that with water, just going in a 300 calorie deficit each day, you're going to lose some weight. How else did you think about your nutrition as you were shifting?
I was skipping ultra processed food. And I was reducing my eating window to maybe 8 hours.
And what was your 8-hour window?
That's probably from 12 o'clock until 7, I would say. Okay. I would finish by 7 most days. 80% of the days I would have days like that. So I would do a little things on many different aspects of health. Yeah.
And being a physician, and especially, very far north in the Northern Hemisphere in the winter, Do you supplement with anything? Vitamin D, magnesium? What is your take on supplementation?
Yeah, I supplement with vitamin D and magnesium, as you say. I also supplement with tanning beds because vitamin D is really a biomarker of that you have gotten enough sunlight. So it's not necessarily the vitamin D in itself, but that is a sign that you have gotten enough sunlight. So I'm actually using tanning beds, and I'm looking at a lot of the research. I'm starting to write a book now on the health benefits of sunlight. And we see more and more that the sun exposure is so important for health. So advising people to avoid the sun has been one of the biggest mistakes that the doctors have been advising people for a long time.
I mean, this is incredibly timely. You're bringing this up. I just came across Dr. Jack Kruse. I don't know if you know him, but all about that. And so now I'm about to go down a rabbit hole to investigate this whole sunlight issue, because I remember my father is a cardiologist, and he had told me this story about the Somali immigrants to the U.S. of they don't even have a word for autism back in Somalia. But when in Minnesota or in Detroit, where you have big population, it's just rampant. And the need for the sunlight, for the vitamin D that they're just not getting in those different climates that their body requires, it causes real issues. And so I will be on pre-ordering that book when you have it out, because I am really curious on this topic right now. So are those the only supplements? It's just the magnesium, vitamin D, and then you add in...
I do omega-3.
Okay.
Yeah. And Q10 I'm doing, and selenium. I'm not always sure what it's called in English, but
it's selenium. Yeah. So I mean, I get that. I eat 2 Brazil nuts a day. Supposedly that's giving me enough selenium. I don't know, but you take a supplemental form of it.
Supplement.
Instead. Okay. Yeah.
But the most important things that I'm talking about in the pulse cure is free.
Right. For sure.
So if you get good enough sleep, eat real food, exercise, get sunlight, have some way to manage your stress levels, breathing exercises, cold water immersions, everything is free, and fasting, of course. So usually, even though I do supplements, I don't have the qualifications to say if that is really important.
I think that's totally fair. I think it's, for a lot of listeners, just understanding, well, this is what the whole package looks like. And so if I only get 90%, it turns out this other part was important and I missed that, then kind of missing the benefits. So just trying to get that full picture. On the nutrition side as well, just coming from a conference where this was a big topic, protein. And do you deliberately think about how much protein you consume in the course of a day, or what percent of your diet it is?
Absolutely. And I try to get it through eggs. And eggs is also important because it contains choline. And that is an important part of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter of the vagus nerve. So that is important. And in addition to the protein, and I also eat meat, preferably, as unprocessed as possible. But I'm kind of not a fanatic. And then eat vegetables and fruits, and try to eat it as natural as possible.
Do you mind me asking, how many eggs do you have a day? And is it full egg or just egg whites?
I would try to get 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is the choline in the white and the yolk, or is it just in the white?
It's in the yolk. It's in the yolk, and it's supposedly better to have it stuffed, but it's not too hard boiled. Supposedly it's easier digestible or available in that state. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I eat right now, because I mostly eat plants personally, but I have this issue on protein. Where are you going to get enough protein? Especially swimming, lifting weights, I need a certain number of calories. And so you're going to have to get a lot from fat. How much can you get from plant protein? And there's certainly powders. So I supplement with powders, but then that can have digestive issues separate. So I've started doing eggs, and I'll do 8 egg whites a day, and twice, right? 4 at lunch, 4 at dinner. And I just put 1 yolk in, but I'm wondering if I should add more yolks to that.
For the vagus nerve.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe I'll double the yolks and do 2 at lunch, 2 at dinner to get up to that 4.
Mm.
Okay. Do you supplement additional protein, or is it all through eggs and meat? You don't need the powders.
I try to do all through that, but I also have some protein shakes once in a while. I'm not sure if that is. I hear a lot of people say it's not the best thing. That it's better to get it through natural foods. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard both sides. There was a conference with Max Lugavere and Dr. Lyon and all these people, and they were going back and forth, but they were citing a lot of research. Like, look, whey protein, it goes back thousands of years. Like, we were deliberately producing this because it's a byproduct, and our body processes it in a different way. It's very valuable as long as you don't have issues with whey, I suppose. Can we also touch on the sleep point? So, and I think this will lead to the wearables and a lot of what you talk about in your book. But on sleep, you certainly saw alcohol really hammered it. And like that was probably, it sounds like, the single biggest shift you had in terms of quality of the sleep you're getting. What now, knowing you're not someone to let perfect be the enemy of good, what is your sleep routine and hygiene, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I try to have a good sleep consistency, that I go to bed and wake up at more or less the same time every day within a half-hour window, if I can. As a doctor, I often work late. I sometimes work at night. I used to work a lot at night. I used to think it was just uncomfortable, but now we know it's dangerous. It's even carcinogenic, to have those night shifts and late nights. So I try to keep my bedroom cool. I think we're talking 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I try to keep it really dark. Yeah, and I try to wind down in the evening the last 1 or 2 hours. Dim the lights, put on blue blocking glasses if I need to in the summer, or if there's too much light around. Yeah, that is what I do. And then, of course, to track it, to see if it's well enough. I try to also to keep the last meal 3 hours before I go to bed. And I try to avoid things like, if I eat things containing chili or this kind of heavy mustard, it will be almost as bad as alcohol. I'll be stressed way into the night. And then, of course, to track it, to see with the sleep trackers and Garmin watches that it's actually restorative sleep.
Yeah. And so the blue blocking glasses, I mean, in Norway, in the winter, certainly, and I imagine probably also in the summer, like, to keep the room cool, it's not that difficult, right? Do you use any of the mattress cooling things, or you're like, hey, it's cool enough here, I can do this naturally?
I'm saving up to buy some 8 Sleep that I understand you're using. Is it good? Is it, you would advise me to get it?
It is, yeah. So I actually use both an 8 Sleep and I have a chili pad. So I have 2 different homes, one in the US, one in Bermuda. So one I use the 8 Sleep, another I use the chili pad. So both are phenomenal. Big fan. Okay. And then probably the 2 of the very low cost, most impactful for me are a comfortable eye mask, because I am light sensitive and I do travel, so I can't always guarantee I control the light environment, and wax earplugs. Because again, I can't control
I use that too. I can't use it. I'm on call here, so I can't use it here. Yeah. But usually I would use that as well. And my bedroom at home, I have full control, so it's completely dark, and that you can't see a hand in front of you. But also, like you say, if I'm traveling or I'm in an environment I can't control the lights, I use an eye mask as well.
And we've touched on it a few times, and I think now is worth diving in, because this is such a big part of the book. There's so many people that drink and say, oh, I don't have an issue. Like, caffeine doesn't impact me. I sleep just fine. Alcohol doesn't impact me. I sleep just fine. And they can think that until you know the truth, right? Like, it seems like the wearables movement.
Yeah, you can't argue with your heart rate. You're losing. So the heart rate monitors will keep track of your physiology around the clock, and it will. And not only the heart rate, but more importantly, the heart rate variability, which is like watching your heart rate with a magnifying glass. It will tell you so much more than just the heart rate in itself. So when you see that, you can see that too much coffee late in the day will reduce your deep sleep. Alcohol will wreck your sleep. And so many other things will affect your sleep that you never even thought of. And we are very poor at judging ourselves, and we don't really have a good sense of our inner state. neither our sleep or our recovery rate, because we never needed that sense. All our senses, all our good senses are directed outwards: eyesight, hearing, smell, and taste, and touch, and all these things. Because the threats throughout history came from the outside: other animals, poor food, enemies, and so on. And the sense, our inner state was depending on the circumstances. You were either hunting or being hunted, or you rested or slept. There was no exercising. There was no stress. There was no phones, iPhones, and so on. So, but the heart rate is, the monitors that can monitor the heart rate is kind of a substitute for this sense that we never needed to develop, but that we can now see. And when we can see the graphs, we can see the numbers, it's so much easier to do the right choices, to be motivated to skip that glass of alcohol when you can see the results.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's almost twofold, because there's one on what helps you get better or worse sleep. I think there's another piece that hopefully most people, especially most people listening to this, now get, but I didn't get until I was in my mid to late 30s, on the importance of sleep itself and why quality sleep matters in terms of not getting dementia and all the downstream effects of poor sleep. Because being the child of physicians, I was explicitly told when I was growing up of, you can train your body not to need sleep. We did it as residents. It's not important. You can get more done. There was this doctor, he wrote all these books because he only slept 4 hours a night. He would write from these times. And now we know scientifically that's not true, right? Yes, you can get through life, but the quality of life, the early death, the mental state, it is all heavily impacted. And
there will be a
need
price.
that aha. Yeah.
Yeah. And in my residency, I remember I worked 51 hours without sleep. So that was kind of being tough. It was what you were expected to do. And after, my aha moment, I started sleeping probably 1 more hour every day. But if you want to sleep 1 more hour every day for like 40 to 60 years, that is actually 2 years of lifetime, So it's not weird that we used to think that, okay, let's cut down on sleep and sleep as little as possible. But now we know the price of that, with increased dementia, with reduced performance, and for longevity, and then almost everything. Then this extra hour of sleep that you get, maybe 7 or 8 hours of sleep, it is really, really important. So now people try to sleep more. They are bragging about their sleep scores rather than sleeping 5 hours a night. So that is probably a big improvement.
Yeah. And I mean, probably with your practice, with your personal journey, as well as in writing the book, you've tried a bunch of these different wearables, right? And so what have you found using the different ones? Because a lot of people ask me and say, well, how do you know it's objectively right? I said, actually, it doesn't matter as much to me if it's objectively right, because it's the differences, it's the changes that matter. So even if my heart rate, it's consistently Y% off, I can still see if it's going up or down based on different behaviors, is my take on it. But I'd be curious, as someone who looked more into this, what your thoughts are.
So my journey to wearable started more than 5 years ago. And for the first 2 years, I was using an ECG monitor that just recorded the HRV. I could see the 24/7 graphs, whether I was in the parasympathetic mode or in the sympathetic mode. And I had to interpret these graphs all by myself. There was no books. The Pulse Cure is the first guidebook in the world on how to use wearables compared to lifestyle strategies. So there was nowhere to find the information. And I didn't even know that there existed rings or watches or other wearables. I just knew about this ECG monitor. And so I used that for 2 years, exploring my own nervous system, my own physiology. And then by chance, I got to know that Garmin had the body battery system in their watches. And then I started using the watch. I could see immediately that the curves that I got from these ECG monitors, I could put it on top of the Garmin monitors, and the difference would be so slight that I just threw away the ECG monitor. It was no use it was a lot more cumbersome using the chest monitor instead of just the watch. of course, a Garmin is still the best choice, I would say, if you want to micromanage your stress levels throughout the day and night and in the moment. But there are other choices as well. That you have the Oura Ring, you have the Samsung Galaxy Ring that's coming now with the Samsung Watch. You have the Apple Watch. If you have the Apple Watch, you could use the Athletic app. That is quite good, not quite as good as Garmin, but it is getting a little bit towards that. And you have the Whoop band that I've been using. And I've been using other instruments as well. And every instrument is so much more than your own guesswork. Your own guesswork is really poor. And it's also the reason why we have ended up in this stress environment with half of the population, more or less, is on the verge of burnout, at some point. And getting the stress-related diseases, the chronic inflammatory diseases that we are treating as doctors. So if we were good at judging our stress levels, we wouldn't have these diseases. We would calm down before we get too stressed and get sick. So any instrument is way better than nothing.
For sure.
Yeah. But the Garmin watches, as I say, is by far the best one. They're also the one with the cheapest entry level. So you could buy a Vivo Smart 5 for around $150. So it's not that expensive as maybe a Whoop or other Oura Ring. So
you brought up a couple times now on the stress management side, right? And so part of the wearable benefit is being able to monitor more real time the stress you're under. Knowledge is the first half of it. Then doing something with that knowledge is where the impact then comes. Now, with the monitoring you're doing, what are your own stress management and mindset practices? Like either consistently day to day or week to week, or in the moment once you notice something is starting to go awry?
I do it day by day and week by week. So both during the course of the day, I make sure that I manage the stress levels, that I do a cold shower in the morning, that I do breathing exercises now and then. If I'm too sedentary, that I'm like now working here on the coast of Norway, I do some running. In between patients, I may just run around the office, jumping jacks and burpees and whatever. In general, try to slow down my speed at some point, because having the book is still in the second year. After 2 years, it's still selling a lot. It's still so much pressure, and so many talks, so many podcasts and appearances here and there. So it's still a stressful life that I didn't have 2 years ago. Being just a normal doctor and suddenly finding yourself having written a bestseller book. So I'm really micromanaging my stress level, making sure that I get enough sleep. But some days are just stressful. Maybe 2 or 3 days in a row where I have to use all my forces. I have to kind of pull my physiological credit card some days in a row. And I can do that, but then I know the physiological load of it. So I know how much do I need to recover for the next day or two. So I make sure that I try to not put more stress on a single day than I can recover from until the next day, or anyway that I don't, after one hard week, that I will have an easy week, that I'm able to see that on the monitors and see the heart rate variability, the nightly heart rate variability over time, that I can see if there gets a dip. If I'm overtaxing myself, I will be able to see it and can do some measures. Because of course, what we can measure, we can manage.
And in that, is it just time and space, or are there specific things you're doing on the recovery side to reduce that stress level?
That would mainly be by breathing slowly. Yeah, breath work, doing 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Now it's almost automatic. So I would do it while I'm listening to patients. I will do it in phone calls. I will do it, as I'm walking. So I have a lot more control over my breath and knowledge of how I can use it to slow my speed down, both as I'm relaxing, but also as I'm going along, as I'm doing things. So that is a way to control it. And then, Of course, on the Garmin watches, you have the body battery system, so that I try to charge up to 80. It's a scale from 0 to 100. I try to charge up to 80 most days, and not go under 20 in the evening, also on most days. As long as I'm in that space, I'm good. Then I'm performing, then I'm operative at all hours during the day.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll have to learn more about that Garmin system. May I ask on the breathing, you said the 4 in, 6 out. Is it cyclical, so there's no pause on the out or the in? It's just in and out?
Just a short. I just do a short, maybe half a second pause at the end, and then in and out.
And then I'm curious, do you think the benefit there, because I have twice a day on my calendar, a reminder to do a 4-7-8 breathing. So breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, and out for 8. And, there's certainly potential placebo benefit, psychosomatic benefit. There's a separate benefit, maybe not necessarily from the breathing, but just the pause and the reminder to pause in general. And then there's probably this separate requirement for the mindfulness to actually reconnect with your breath. And so whether the pattern is 4-6 or a 4-4-4 block breathing or a 4-7-8 is less important than just tuning into your breath to bring yourself back into your body, back to what you mentioned before of all our senses are outward looking. And this is a way to say, no, let's start looking back in again. So where do you think the benefits are coming from? I guess is my question.
I think the most important is to breathe slowly and to find the pace that suits you. Often you would feel it. Often you would feel that it's about 6 breaths a minute. So there's a sort of a sweet spot for most people, somewhere around 6 breaths a minute. And you would often feel it, the pace of it. And then, of course, you have the box breath, you have the 4-7-8. I also try that, but it's a bit too hard for me. It's a bit too long because 4-7-8, will be like 3 breaths a minute. And often that stresses me more than it calms me down. So it's a bit too hard for me. And I would also do the box breath of 3 seconds, 3, 3, 3, 3. Because the 4-1 is also a bit too stressful for me. So you will find the one that you're comfortable with and according to your capacity for breathing. The most important thing is the knowledge that you can control your parasympathetic nervous system with the breath. It's kind of a signal. The autonomic nervous system I call in the book, I call it the inner living fossil in our brain. It's 150 million or 200 million years old. And it still more or less works in the same way, which is, of course, why we can do research on rats and all the other, primitive animals. And this system is still working as if it was 100 million years ago. So when we breathe slowly, it's a strong signal to that part of the brain that it's calm out there. This organism is breathing slowly. There's no war in sight. There's no enemy in sight. We can do the recovery work from the vagus nerve. So it's a way to kind of trick our body and mind into a more calmer state. And that is very, very necessary in our modern world. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. With your trackers, this is more a selfish question. Do you monitor your respiratory rate at night?
No, not much.
Okay.
I'm not sure how well they perform that either. So I'm not sure how much we can trust the calculations of the respiratory rate. Probably the 8 sleep would be better because it would be easier to measure it, being a mattress and not just using the heart rate for guesswork.
Yeah, and that's where, because I use multiple, seeing that they move in tandem of if it's going up or down one night. It was something I didn't think anything of, but when you were saying that 6 breaths per minute, I found I was getting up to 16, my respiratory rate at night. And Dr. Andy Galpin was saying, hey, look, if you're over 12, this is kind of a red flag. And so when I did some research, and it turned out swimmers, even though, I was a swimmer, you think strong lungs, all of this, but because we spend so much time inside with chlorine, we basically poisoned and damaged our lungs. And so have been getting devices to try to work on those muscles and have gotten it down to 14, which is still high, but from the 16 where I started, it's getting an improvement. But 6 seems very out of reach at this moment.
I wouldn't be able to have that at night. That is only while you're in conscious control.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. So you wouldn't be able to maybe 8 breaths a minute. I can see on my monitor that is the lowest breath rate. Wow. But the average would probably be around 12, 11, 12, I would guess. Yeah.
That still would be amazing if I can get back down to that. Very interesting. One thing you touched on that I'd like to come back to, again, probably more selfishly than for any other reason, fasting. So what is your take on fasting? We talked about time-restricted feeding, but I would put that in a different camp than true fasting. Is fasting something that you utilize at all in your routine? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, I used to do a lot of 5-2 fasting with 2 days a week with maybe 600 or 700 calories and the 5 other days normal. But now I usually only do the restricted feeding window. I sometimes do a 5 days fasting mimicking diet where you eat like 700 calories, the Volta Longo style, but with real food. I think that you get a long way with the restricted feeding window. And if you, in addition to that, do a workout, then you get the autophagy effect of it, I think. So, autophagy is, of course, very important, that you can push your body to recirculate, the worst cells, the senescent cells are on the way to developing into cancer or in sending out inflammatory signals to your body and creating inflammation. So some way of fasting I can see clearly is working, and it will also be demonstrable on your monitor. The first time I was fasting, I was expecting to see stress, because it's uncomfortable, and I was expecting to see stress on my monitors, but it was totally calm. So fasting is a way to get your HRV better and to get you into the parasympathetic mode. And that you are able to see it on your monitor is, of course, also motivating, because you're doing something that is quite hard, not to eat it. So when you see the result, it's so much easier to do it.
Yeah. So, I now do it twice a year. I do a 5-day fast. Right. I used to do it 4 times, but I thought I was losing too much strength. But it's exactly as you say. The first few nights, my HRV basically doubles. And it's the body is not having to spend time digesting food and cleaning and everything. It's just doing all this repair and recovery. It's a beautiful thing. By the end, I say, I don't know if it's because my body's saying, hey, wake up and go hunt and get some food, or it's just my excitement that I know, hey, tomorrow morning when I wake up, I get to eat again. But by the last night, I don't sleep quite as well as those first few nights.
Yeah. And it's also important in general to be flexible and not to be too rigid, that we are able to, at some days, use all our forces, go all out and really stress our systems, both mentally and physically. And that we other days are able to calm completely down and be in that control ourselves, and also, with eating, that you're able to not eat and that you're able to eat, and also with temperature, that you're able to be in the sauna and push yourself temperature wise, and also be to the cold water and have this flexibility. I think that's very important to mimic the circumstances of our evolutionary times, and because what we can see on our technological wonders, with the wearables, is that the more we can move towards the ancient lifestyle, the better we become. And that is good, because that lifestyle didn't cost any money, as I was talking about. So it's a good thing. And it's, because there's too much money in sick people. That is the problem of the healthcare system, that we, as a strategy, wait until people get sick and then we treat them. And that costs it's a lot of people involved, a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, a lot of equipment, to do it that way. And of course, for people, it's expensive. And also it makes it your health, the control of your health is outside your control. But with these measurements and keeping track of our health in these ways, also with the CGM monitor, of course, as a glucose monitor, we can avoid getting sick. And then the control is in your own hand. So the whole thing about wearables is really a huge shift of power from the doctor and the healthcare system and into your own hands, literally, giving you the control. So I think it's a huge thing. It's a real revolution in healthcare, I would say.
Now, we've talked mostly about looking inside, right? And we're getting these monitors to help us look inside more. But our senses are all outward facing, and we are creatures that do and need to interact with our environment. And we know on the social connection side, right, if you're socially isolated, just like with sleep, you have a 50% higher chance of developing dementia. It's being lonely has the same effects as obesity and alcoholism when you think about impacts on our health. And so how do you think about that, where it's not getting captured in our wearables?
Oh, right it now? Does. It does get captured. Yeah. Absolutely. If you have good relationships, it will be seen in the heart rate. And actually, and that is quite funny, because a lot of people who are considering themselves introverts and trying to avoid people because at some level they felt stressed by it, at another level, the heart rate monitors could show that when they are with people, their heart rate is better. Even though at some level, in there, because the heart rate monitors the basic system in your body. It doesn't manage or measure your thoughts, in the intellectual brain. So you could still feel horrible, but your autonomic nervous system is in balance. You can still feel pain. You can still have poor thoughts about your ex breaking up with you without it necessarily affecting your autonomic nervous system. And good relationships will be seen in a better heart rate variability. At the same, and a poor relationship, so many people at work will see that when they're working with certain colleagues, their stress levels is high. And then they will try to minimize the contact with that person, for example. And of course, there's two sides of that. Good relationships are good for your health, and bad relationships are very bad for your health, and both of these things you can see in the heart rate. Your heart rate will respond to any demand on your body or any relieving factor on your stress level. So also being social. Yeah.
That resonates, that you can see it on the output metrics. I guess what I was thinking more is the wearable will show you how much sleep you got, or how much deep sleep you got, or how your stress score for the day in terms of fitness level and what you put your body under, and the hours or minutes that you spent exercising, and the calories you burned, or the steps you walked. And what may not get captured, and I would love to get corrected here, is the breadth and depth of your social interactions and connections as the input metrics. You're just seeing the results on the other side. And so for someone who's looking at it and say, okay, I can see when I have these 2 glasses of alcohol at night, I'm seeing this impact on my sleep. How do you suggest others take that same kind of rigor and thought process to how they choose to engage with other people and the world around them?
Yeah. So you can see the effect on your stress level of interactions with people. Some people can see that when they're with certain people, they can even tolerate 2 glasses of wine that they couldn't necessarily tolerate with other people. A lot of extroverts can see, are often shocked to see that their interactions is very taxing. So because a lot of people, and including myself, used to think, okay, that is because the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic part, is called fight, flight, and freeze. So you would necessarily think that it's only a negative state. So as long as you were having fun, it is not taxing your system. And that is what a lot of people have been thinking, that as long as I'm having fun, I don't need to recover from that. But a lot of particularly extroverts find that because they thrive on being with people, all day long. But when they see that it's actually taxing their system, they also have to recover from the fun, interesting conversations and social, situations. Then they learn that too, that this 4 hours of being at the very fun party, needs to be recovered from in hindsight, so that they don't get into a burnout situation. So I think I'm not sure if that was what you were asking about, but there is things to be learned from how your whole system reacts to a social situation, and because the most important thing is the totality of it. That you have a stress balance that over time is sustainable. We are supposed to stress. The worst thing would be not to stress. Then you would just become weaker and weaker and weaker until everything is a stress, right? Just like if you would refrain from doing any workout and then just moving across the floor gets hard. So we just have to find the right balance between stress and recovery. We're not necessarily overstressed, but we are mainly under recovered. That is the biggest problem, that we haven't had a focus on recovery. Of course, the athletes know that more than ever. They do cold plunges, cold exposures, breath work, they sleep more, and so on. But I think in the general population, we have been thinking like we are machines. We can just go on and go on and go on and push ourselves. There's no price to be paid for that. But of course it is. And you don't know what recovery is until you can measure it, because I used to think that I was calming down, but I could see from my wearables that I was not. What I thought was a calm state, there was still a couple of kind of leagues beyond that of recovery.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Seeing that and learning that, how do you now, deliberately or not, think about your own social connection and engagement with others? I mean, is it something you schedule a certain amount of time, or if you scheduled a certain amount of time, you then block a proportionate amount of time for recovery from those parties? Like, how do you manage that now?
I can be calm in any situation now. So I'm usually with people as much as I want. I don't have to have any restrictions on that. So what stresses me the most is food, actually. Different kinds of food can stress me more. So that is what I have to be very particular about, what to eat and when to eat. And that was, of course, one of the biggest surprises when you started tracking the system, that food would be a stressor. You would never have thought of that. And the first surprise was that when I was working, as a normal GP, and in the lunchtime, instead of my usual salad, there was some kind of celebration. Maybe a colleague was, quitting their job or whatever. They had a huge cake, and I took 2 big slices of that cake instead of the salad, and my stress levels went through the roof. I was just, I couldn't understand what was happening. How can my heart rate go up 15 beats just because I'm eating something for hours, maybe for 5 hours afterwards, and I would feel tired. So that was the start of my exploration into food and food intolerances, and so many people having health problems. At the bottom of that is the food intolerance. And if you have a food intolerance, your heart rate will react to that food, and you can see it. So I usually say to people that if there's a big difference between your stress levels when you eat and fast, it should be some difference, But if it's a huge difference, then there's a chance that you may have a food intolerance that you should have to check out through special blood test.
Yeah, so this is a lot, right? We've talked about this. This was a journey. You had your own aha moment, and then getting informed by data, which we live in the best time in history for this, because instead of having to go to a lab or a hospital, we can wear this stuff and get this data real time. For someone who is just getting started and is saying, wow, this seems like a lot. You've already touched on most of the things are free, but they're not necessarily free in terms of time, and time's the most valuable asset. So if somebody was just to get started, where would you suggest they take that first step?
And that would be to sleep better, to prioritize sleep. And once they sleep better, they will have a better heart rate variability. They will have more willpower. They will have more energy to do the right choices the rest of the day, to do some exercise, to choose an apple instead of a chocolate, and so on. So that is the starting point also in the book, to improve sleep.
Yeah, fantastic.
And just to maybe once you start tracking your system, it's a huge thing. Suddenly you get a window into your own physiology, and it can be a challenge. So you also just have to be patient and accepting that probably you will see too much stress. 80% of the diseases that we are treating is because of too much stress. So the chances are that you will see more stress than you would hope for, right?
Right.
But that's also good. And you must just see that it may be a long journey ahead to get this control of your speed level, because it's almost like you suddenly get a dashboard, like in your car, suddenly get a dashboard into your own physiology. And it will take some time to manage that. And you just have to be accepting and patient and do one step at a time.
I think that is the best advice there is. Sleep is so foundational, and then just do your best one step at a time. Back to where you started it. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You're going to get 80% of the benefit from just putting forth 20% of the effort. And for those, again, the book is The Pulse Cure. It is phenomenal. And I am so grateful for you taking the time to not only write it and share it with the world, but also to come on the Home of Healthspan podcast today and share all your wisdom with us. So Torkil, thank you.
Thanks a lot for coming in. And I would also say that a lot of people listening to podcasts like better to listen to audibles, and the book is also an audiobook that you'll get anywhere you buy books, and even on your iPhone and so on. So.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure to put this in the show notes and certainly on Torkil's Lively page as well. So thank you again. And until next time, enjoy a lively day. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.